What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Not So Alpha Males podcast, brought to you by your boys Tom and Toby. But before we kick off this week's episode, we have a few announcements to make. So we finally agreed to a structure for this thing, and we're going to be releasing episodes every other Thursday. So stay tuned to that. And one way you can stay tuned is we have an Instagram page now, don't we?
We do. We took thoughts from the last episode, and we've made that thing. We've got some nice info on there about each episode. We've got our cocktails. If you all want to see the terrible drinks that we've been making over the last couple of weeks.
We're true to our word. So go check that out. That's at Not So Alpha Males on Instagram. So please go follow. What else have we got? We've got some artwork in the pipeline as well, haven't we? We're going to try and make this all a bit more official.
Yeah, we're ditching that terrible picture of the yellow background with the headphones.
That really hurts. That does.
Very unoriginal picture. So we're going to change that.
I put a lot of hard work into that, man. Like the creativity juices that I had to get going for that. And you're just slating on it, whatever fucking violation that is there. And also, big thank you to all the new listeners we've got. We've been slowly creeping up views now. So I guess we're famous.
We made it, mate. We've made it.
We made
it.
Spotify's going to be calling any moment now. So, thank you. We see you. We appreciate all you tuning in. Right. What are you drinking this week, Tobes?
So, Tom, I have made a strawberry daiquiri today. As you can see, it's got a little umbrella and a nice stripy straw.
Very nice.
It's
Pictures will be on Instagram.
They will be. There's a lot of rum in there, some frozen strawberries, and some sugar syrup. So
it's actually
very nice, Tom.
Do you think we should put the ingredients list down on the description of the photo? You know, in case everyone wants to make these gorgeous drinks.
The last episode, no one wants to make the drinks we made. They were terrible.
That's true.
To be fair, this strawberry daiquiri is very nice.
And it was also a shout that this is becoming a very expensive habit because I just dropped 40 quid in booze yesterday for the alcohol I've had to make for this one. So we're really going to have to rethink this
we're banking on that ad revenue to come in once we've got enough views. And then
so everyone enjoy it. Keep listening all the way through because at some point we'll have some ads and then we'll all be getting money. So it's going to be grand. This week I've gone for a margarita. So I'm going to have a little sip.
How do you make a margarita? Teach me.
Oh, it's strong, but it's quite nice. It's lime juice, tequila, and Cointreau.
I'm not a tequila kind of guy.
For 4 o'clock on a Saturday, it's intense. So, but you know, this is what it's all about.
True.
Right, should we get started with the topics this week?
Let's do it.
Right, I'll kick us off this week. And I know all our listeners have been waiting 2 weeks for this because I teased it in the last episode and I never got around to it. So I'm going to deliver today.
I haven't been able to sleep, Tom. I haven't been able to sleep.
Well, let's get into it then. Lost Civilisations. So I'm going to start off by hitting you with some Latin. I need to give you some background, basically. Okay, there's a lot to this story. I've got to fit it into 20 minutes. So I'm going to be skipping over large bits, but please bear with me. Anyway, the word civilization comes from the Latin word civitas, meaning cities. So in its basic definition, a civilization is a collection of cities. So when a group of people from various different settlements work together instead of working against each other. And the whole point I'm going to this is because going back into ancient times, we define periods by their civilizations. And the whole idea of my topic this week is that we might be overlooking the possibilities of some much, much, much older civilizations out there, which is kind of a crazy thought of some sort of long lost advanced civilization. So first, let's look at the Egyptians, okay? And they started at about 3150 BC. And, you know, they're the famous guys for the pyramids, the temples, obelisks, things like that. The pyramids of Egypt, you know, Giza. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know which one it is?
What a Giza. I do know.
They were built in 2500 BC. Going further back, you've got the Norte Chio. Okay, so now we're going back to 4000 BC. This is the oldest known civilization in the Americas area, and these guys are based in Peru.
Was that for like the Mayans and that lot, or is that?
This is way before all that stuff, man. We're going really far back now. And the reason I have to go far back is for what's coming on later. It'll all make sense.
Ooh.
I just need to lay out all this groundwork. I need to set out all the BCs, basically. And then going back further than that is the oldest civilization we know of, which was the Sumerian civilization, and they exist around 6,500 BC. So like we're 8,000 years old now. And those guys were the ones who invented the wheel. That's a pretty big one, that is. So, and they were based from Iraq. So yeah, all of our current understanding is that civilizations came from the Middle East area. Like they are the oldest parts of the world, so to speak. And they were big on like leatherwork, metalwork, and sort of the coming of the Bronze Age and things like that.
So that when was that? 8,000
That
BC?
was 6,000 BC, 8,000 years ago odd.
So if humans have been around for 200,000 years, what have they been doing for the last 194,000 years?
Great question, Tobes. That's why I started off with the definition of a civilization, because that's how we categorize it. Before that, essentially we categorized it all as hunter-gatherers. So like it would be tribes or like just collections of people against one another. And they never thought to come together in multiple cities and multiple groups and sort of have a mutual peace and understanding and put their efforts towards developing technologies and things like that. Even if I say technologies, I'm not talking about iPads, I'm just talking about like planting seeds in the most effective way, or like water drainage. And so
the thing is, did you know, it's a bit of a side one, ancient Egypt, apparently they had like central heating and stuff. They like...
What? No, I did not know that.
No,
I did not know that.
Because it's obviously not the way we have it. They would heat water, make it go around.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't really know that much about it. I haven't looked into it, but I just know that they have like that kind of technology back
there you go.
2000 BC.
Crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy, man. And then the last kind of civilization I want to touch upon, which is much more later, because this is where the idea of knowing about the world comes into play, is the Austronesians, and they started in Taiwan about 3000 BC. So those were the guys who founded Easter Island, and you know the whole story about Easter Island. Yeah. I don't know how much you know about it, but that's the island where they sailed there and they were like, this is great. This is a great island. It's abundant with food and perfect to make houses. And basically they just kept on sending people there and not really telling the original settlement, don't send any more people. And they exhausted the natural resources of the island and they all died off. And then all that was left behind was these big monolithic heads type things that you referred to, and that we found thousands of years later. But yeah, it's something on those lines. I didn't look into them for this topic, but it was something on those lines, and it's kind of like an analogy for what we're doing to the planet right now, really. But yeah, so the Austronesians, their civilizations came up in about 3000 BC, but the Easter Island stuff didn't happen to about 1000 AD, so only like 1,000 years ago. So before that, they were learning about making boats and then actually sailing them out. But when you look at a map, they didn't do like huge sea voyages. Like when you look at Taiwan, they basically went to all the Austronesian islands. They might have gone as far south as Australia. I'm not too sure. The first time we actually sailed around the world was 1519, which is quite crazy.
Around the whole globe.
About the whole globe, yeah, by a Spanish chap. And it's a really interesting route he took. And I'm going to put this picture on Instagram so people can have a look at it. But it's by a chap named Ferdinand Magellan. Set out with 5 ships to do this voyage. He died along the way, and then 4 of the 5 ships didn't make it. And then 3 years later, the last one showed up back in Spain. Anyway, so what does all this mean? Where am I going with this, Tom? You might be asking.
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea.
The main point I'm trying to get to you, and it's the focus of all this, is that the oldest civilizations we know of are like about 6,000 BC. And those civilizations didn't know about each other. The world wasn't connected. People weren't sailing around to each other like they do now. And the first time we actually sailed around the world was in 1519. What I'm going to come to you right now with is something called the Piri-Reis map. And this is one of the oldest maps in existence. I can't remember what museum it is. I need to remember that. I'll put it on Instagram, because I actually want to go see it in person. But it's the oldest map. It's from 1513. And unfortunately, over the test of time, only a third of it is left. And what it depicts is the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and then the northern coast of Antarctica. Where I'm going with this is Antarctica, because in 1513, we didn't know Antarctica existed. Antarctica wasn't actually founded until 1820. So 300 years later. And also
we knew that there was ice there, right?
No, we didn't know it, and we just thought it was a blank hole. If you look on maps, older maps, so there was in 1817 this I think it was a British naval officer. He put together all actual known reported latitudes and longitudes of land masses, and there was basically a massive big hole where Antarctica was, and then a few years later someone went there and then found obviously Antarctica being there. But so we, like, in our Western world, we had no idea it existed basically at the point of 1513. But then on this map, which is from Turkey, because this Turkish naval officer called Piri Reis, hence the name of the map, came together, brought loads of different maps that everyone had been putting together recently for different areas of the world, and basically tried to draw the first world map. And on it was a perfect representation of Antarctica, exactly where it should have been. This map has a lot of people confused because of Antarctica. And what's even more fascinating about it, for instance, the detail on it. So it actually is a depiction of Antarctica without the ice on it. And the last time there was no ice on Antarctica was between the years 13,000 BC and 6,000 BC. So do you see where I'm starting to go with this now? Have I lost you?
But how did he know?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. That's why I wanted to. That's why. Well, wait there. I'm going to get to it. Or that's why I wanted to lay out the civilization. So, and we only actually figured out the actual latitude and longitude of Antarctica fairly recently. The actual landmass. Because obviously it's like a few hundred meters of ice on top of it and stretching out over the ocean. The actual landmass of it was like 1976, I think, from my research. We actually found where it was, just because of that was when we had radar technology to like beam down and in the actual Earth mass of it. Also, what's incredible about this map is actually how accurate the drawing is. And so the largest error on it is no more than half a degree. And this is quite significant because up until then, we couldn't draw maps very well at all. So for all you non-map people out, sorry, you have a question, Toby?
So just to summarize this beginning bit.
Okay, yeah.
The Piri Reis, he's been getting all these different maps together, putting them into one big one.
Yeah.
Where's he got this Antarctica one from? Or are you going to come on to that?
I'm going to come on to that. I just wanted to actually let everyone appreciate how difficult longitude and latitudes are to calculate. And they actually require a lot of maths. We couldn't do it until 1714 when this guy, I can't remember his name, but he invented the chronometer, which allows for keeping time at sea. Because to calculate longitude, it not just takes positions of the sun and the stars and where you are, but also the time of day and things like that. So, and keeping time at sea was a very, very difficult feat. For someone to be able to map out Antarctica that accurately must have had that kind of technology. And we didn't get that technology until about 1714, so really, really late. So it starts. So the direction I'm going with this right now is there's theories about this really old civilization, like 6,000 plus BC, which had quite advanced technology. Like I'm talking 1740s level technology, which is very, very recent and something no one actually thinks is possible. If we start at looking at a possible answer as to how this is possible, the Piri Reis map, as you said, is a map made up of a ton of different source maps. So because it was much cheaper, obviously it still is probably cheaper today, to send out a bunch of people to survey places and go voyages and find different lands and then map those and then come back, rather than sending one person out on one ship who would probably die at sea, and then collate them all together into one big map. So that's essentially what it's doing. But at the time, obviously, people couldn't really map very well. And so what Piri Reis did was use these much, much older source maps. And Piri Reis himself is actually very humble about it and says he didn't do any of the surveying or original drawings himself, but instead he combined a large number of source maps. So he named some of them, one of which is the Christopher Columbus map, the one he drew when he went across to the Americas. So if you imagine, obviously you've got all these big expeditions going on, people doing various trips, and then he's collating all these maps into one. And so it starts begging the question, there must have been a map, some older source map that has Antarctica on it in the state that it was 6,000 BC odd. And this is the theory about how it all came to be, maps being based on older maps, which in turn is being based on older maps. And it's sort of like knowledge being passed down through generations. Was there some sort of older civilization which was advanced enough, who were at least sailing around the world and actually mapping the world itself, which indicates they had a grasp of maths, technology, constructions to build seafaring boats like that, all the kinds of skills that would suggest they were even more advanced than some of those civilizations that I mentioned right at the start. Like the Egyptians couldn't do that, the Sumerians couldn't do that. You have to add on another few thousand years of progress to be able to do this. And so this is where some people, such as a chap called Graham Hancock, who has tons of books out on this, and this is where I was sort of doing most of my research, so shout out to him. He argues that there was a kind of civilization that existed around 13,000 BC, who were then wiped out by some sort of global event. And he's been pushing this theory since about the 1980s, and everyone's laughed at him, and because no one in the mainstream sort of academia acknowledged the existence of civilizations older than sort of 6,000 BC. So his theory argues that a comet impacted the Earth around 12,600 BC. And that was a kind of like dinosaur level event, and one that fucked up the Earth pretty bad. His idea is based on the assumption that, like today, if you imagine we had a comet coming at us right now, we obviously have our society, very advanced, most of the Western world, all that kind of thing. But then you also have a lot of still uncontacted tribes in the Amazon who have no idea about the rest of the world. And his kind of assumption is, if something was to happen to Earth that would cause some sort of mass extinction, fuck up the Earth pretty badly for a few thousand years, the only people to actually survive that would be those uncontacted tribes, people who actually still live off the land, know how to forage. Whereas me and you, we wouldn't know how to live in some sort of post-apocalyptic world, would we? Like, we ain't got the skills for that.
Speak for yourself. I've watched a lot of Bear Grylls, mate.
Fair enough. Maybe you'll just start drinking your piss and you'll survive then. Go for it. So his idea is that the hunter-gatherer people would have survived. And that's his idea.
I don't know if I agree with that, though.
Do you know why not?
Because if you're tribal group and you've only lived off that bit of land, say if an asteroid hits, it fucks up the Earth, like you said. All it takes is your bit of land to change slightly, and you won't have any of the technology to adapt to survive. Because if for example, if there was a massive ice age or something like that, like, you wouldn't be able to adapt without the technology that we would be able to now. That would be my argument.
I think what his theory is sort of a situation where you don't have that technology at all. Like, you wouldn't have a bunker. Like, it would destroy a bunker, and it'd only be pockets around the world that actually survive to some sort of degree compared to what it was before. Like, buildings won't be here anymore, all that kind of thing. Like, we'll be out in with nothing to.
It's his idea that this civilization will, like, spread across the world quite a lot, or just one area.
I don't know. He doesn't comment on that bit. It's just that there was this older civilization, or there must have been this older civilization. His theory is there must have been this older civilization who had an understanding of maths and science and shipbuilding and sailed around the world with the intent of mapping it, if this old source map exists, that fueled the Piri-Reis map. And for a civilization to do that, like, you've got to be a pretty stable civilization to be able to send people away to do this kind of mission. Like, if you're hunter-gatherer, like at the hunter-gatherer level, the reason it takes so long to become civilized and become a civilization is because every day you're fighting to get enough food just to survive. But when you're in a civilization, you start sharing resources much more, and you can build things. Obviously, to let people think, how could I best build this? How could I do this? Then requires those people to then think about maths and think about construction, rather than thinking, I need to go hunt food and things like that. So his argument is that there has to be this much, much older civilization who had that level of development to then go on these sea voyages and map things like that. And all of the oldest maps in the world could start from about 1500 AD. Everything before that's just been lost pretty much. But on them,
all the maps were used older maps. That's what you're saying.
All of those used older maps, which have all been lost to the passage of time. But to give you some more mainstream, I mean, the mainstream answer is we don't know. No one can come up with a solution for it yet. It's just that all these old maps. That is actually one of the concepts that some people argue. Some people say that it's a fake and it's just a coincidence that it was so accurately drawn. That seems a bit of a get out of jail free card. That one, a bit of a just
especially when
it's
the land mass. I think.
I know, because that's what's the most crazy bit about it. But yeah, some point to alien technology, some point to dumb luck. Like, it's. I mean, I don't know what to think about it. There's this map which shows our Earth and the land masses of our Earth thousands and thousands of years before we've ever even been able to map them. So surely there has to have been someone there to do it. And that must mean some sort of more civilized, like some other civilization way back when.
If you actually think of the timescales of how long humans have been around, so they say, what, 200,000 years. Like, even if it was before that, like,
yeah.
you know, think of the lifetime of the planet. So, like, you know, the dinosaurs were around, what, 60 million years ago before they got wiped out. And it's like, why is it only now and 200,000 years ago that we popped around? Like, could we have, or someone else have been wiped out? And then would we not see like fossils and
this is the biggest thing.
Things?
There's so little money in archaeology, not architecture. There's a lot of money in architecture. In archaeology, there's very little money. They barely dig around anywhere these days. Like, you have to get privately funded. Like, people are just most funds come from private organizations that are just interested in it. And, you know, it's also, if there is any money going for like something like that, people don't want to bet on just trying to find stuff. They'd rather go and spend it on the pyramids of Giza, where they probably might find another tomb and then something really good that brings publicity and makes money back. But yeah, no, the short answer is we don't explore it. We don't dig.
What do you think, Tom? What do you believe?
I would love there to be some sort of really old civilization that existed that was like maybe like today, but then they got wiped out by something, and it's just like a few little bits and bobs, these scraps of information that have actually survived till then, or like, you know, through word of mouth and things like that over thousands of years. Those are the only things that actually survived from that time. That's what I hope that's the case, because that'd be pretty cool. But
we'll never know.
Unless
something gets found.
No, and that's the other thing.
And there's like the cave paintings and things, which are thousands and thousands of years ago. But...
like this. So who knows what was in the past, man? It's a shame that it's all just gone, really. Like, whoever burnt that great Library of Alexandria, man.
Bit of a dick move.
Dick move, that. Like, can you imagine the kind of things that are in there? Yeah, no, that's me. Take it what you will. Think what you want to think, but just presenting it to you.
I'm glad I waited 2 whole weeks for that.
I had reservations about this topic, but I've just gone for it, mate.
No, I think it's interesting. I do.
It's kind of like the same argument of aliens, really. Like, it's the same episode of talk about aliens. Like, except there's a bit more proof actually here than aliens proof.
Yeah, it's just whether someone's just forged it, and this whole thing is just
that's more of the mainstream view. Exactly. Yeah, I'm out. There you go.
Good. I like it. Should I move on to my...
Over to you, mate. Over to you.
So it's been quite a stressful week, Tom. I'm not going to lie to you, because, you know, in the last episode we said cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, what actually is it? We talk about it a lot. Yeah. And it actually came up in the news this week about it hitting the highest it's ever been, $50,000 for one Bitcoin. And there's a reason why we don't know much about it. It's because it's actually quite complicated to understand. And I found that out over the week.
I'll see if you can tell me, and then I'll blame the teacher if I can't understand.
I don't want you to ask too many questions, because
don't push me on this topic.
Yeah.
No, go for it. I'm sure you got it, man. You got it.
I got this. Yeah. So to start my topic on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I think it's important to understand what money actually is. Like, do you know what money is, Tom?
That's a deep question, it sounds like.
Like, I know we have like you get a £5 note, but like, what actually is that? And what is a currency? I think it's quite important to actually go into the details. I'm going to take you on a history lesson. You know how you've done your ancient civilizations? I'm going to go back there as well. I love history. Merge the two. I'm going to merge the two there.
Perfect episode.
So what happened when we were back in like the tribal times? So before civilizations, or maybe not, depending on when it started.
This is where it all goes. Who knows?
Yeah. So let's take it, for example, me and you are in a tribe, and you went out and you killed a deer somehow with them tiny little arms of yours. But I then come to you and ask for a bit of meat.
At least I won't be drinking piss in a post-apocalyptic world.
So I come to you and I'm like, oh, can I have a bit of deer meat? And because you're so nice, you say, yeah, sure, Toby, have some deer meat. And you keep in track in your head, Toby's taking a bit of my deer meat. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I owe Tom something now. So I've gone and I've cut down a tree, because like my massive arms make some fire.
I just want to argue that killing a deer is a lot more difficult than chopping down a tree.
Yeah,
I feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot here.
I feel like you should have swapped them around.
Yeah.
And so I've cut down a tree, and you want some firewood, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make your little fire. And I'm like, yeah, have some. So in my head, I've given you some firewood, you've given me some meat. We're all good. But often that would lead to arguments, because people would forget what they owed. And what that's called is a ledger. So a ledger is basically a book of transactions. So for this example, in my head, I've got a ledger that's saying I've eaten some of your meat and you've taken
Oh,
some
have
of
you
my
now?
firewood.
Hey, hey.
Oi, oi.
Oi, oi.
You'd like that, right? So anyway,
Sorry, get back to your ledger.
back on it, right? So yeah, we all have these ledgers in our minds, okay? And this happened in tribes all the time until thousands of years ago. Someone came up with this new technology, this new idea. I'm going to say it was you in this case, but obviously that wouldn't have been the case. But
I'm going to take it. I need
come
those
to me.
confidence boosts.
You've come to me, you're wanting some firewood, yeah? And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, the same old. Giving you it. In my head, I've got, okay, I've given Tom some firewood. But in this time, you say, oh, here, have these beads. Okay. I'm like, I don't want them fucking beads. What am I going to do with beads? But you say...
yeah, Toby, you're just not a forward thinker like me. That's what separates us.
I should have structured these round. I don't know why I've done it this way. I've given you
I know,
way
this
too
is a
much credit.
great episode. I've invented money.
So
Fair play.
You've given me these beads. It's not what I'm physically going to do with them, but what they physically represent. And this is what they call it, like an objective ledger. So now there's a physical way of tracking like debt around the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't have someone who just freeloads because he won't have any bees. So he can't then pay for anything. And this kind of idea took off massively. Like it went around the world, all these different tribes that interacted with each other, they ended up all taking up this idea. And what they used as bees would change. So depending on what's around them, so some would use rocks, some would use salts and things like that. But it basically had to have 6 main qualities, what these bees were. I'm gonna list these now for you, so be ready.
Go. I want to know. Go ahead.
So the first one, which is the most important, is that it's scarce. So you couldn't use leaves on a tree, for example. You couldn't use that because someone would just pick loads of leaves off the tree and they just pay for everything, and the whole system just wouldn't work. So the first one, scarcity. Second one, durability. So you can't have it decay or erode. 3, it has to be divisible. You'd have to be able to split it up so you can pay for different things in the different amounts. Transportable, recognizable, and tangible. So there's like 6 main things there. And this worked really well until probably around the, what you were saying, the ancient Egypt times, where people then actually started to branch out and the actual area that they were trading with got much bigger. And what that meant was that the scarcity of one tribe of what their beads were, it might not have been scarce for another tribe. And they were unable to trade because they were trading things that didn't have as much value to them as did for the other tribe. And that's when a little thing called gold came about. So this is kind of the story of why we use gold, because it's the first, they call it universal ledger. So it was the ability to keep track of debt universally around the world, because for one, it's quite scarce. I think we've only filled like 2 Olympic swimming pools worth of gold that we've ever mined from the earth. Yeah. No. Like if you melted it all down, it'd be 2 Olympic swimming pools. That's still quite big, but I mean, it's not that big when you think of like the scale of how much gold. So next 5,000 years, like we still use it now as gold as a way to hold value. Anyway, so I've taken you down that whole
That's very interesting. That could be the topic right there, to be honest. That's fascinating as hell.
I thought it was quite cool that's why we use gold, and it's come from all of that. But it's also made Bitcoin actually very relevant now. So it's the first time in 5,000 years that we've got something that could be superior to gold in every one of them 6 things that I mentioned. So if you think scarce, so I don't know if you knew, but there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins ever produced. Now, I'm going to go into the reasons to that a little bit later if I've got time, but it's scarcer than gold. It actually can be a lot more divisible than gold. So even though there's 21 million Bitcoins ever made, you can split 1 Bitcoin to 100th of a million, so 8 decimal places. So you can have a 0.00001 Bitcoin, and that's called a Satoshi. Just out of
Satoshi, okay.
Fun fact there.
I might just be able to afford that.
Well, that's the thing. There wouldn't even be a penny right now, even though Bitcoin's obviously at the highest value it's ever been. A Satoshi wouldn't even be a penny. But the idea is that 1,000 years from now, Satoshi could actually be £200 worth of like what it is now. So like it can still go up. It has a lot of flex. So that's not actually the case yet, though. Really, I think that's the kind of the aim of Bitcoin, or one of the aims, is to be kind of a new placeholder for gold in the digital world. But because it's so volatile at the moment, it's a bit risky. Like if it calmed down, then people would just put money into it and it would hold its value.
Mhm.
Anyway, so that was a little bit of a story about why Bitcoin's becoming a bit relevant now. You're probably going to ask me, what is Bitcoin, or any cryptocurrency for that matter? Are you going to ask me that, Tom?
What is Bitcoin?
I'm glad you asked, Tom. So simply put,
Smooth, nothing but smooth on this podcast. I love it.
so Bitcoin is a digital currency that is decentralized, which records transactions in a distributed ledger called blockchain. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, you lost me now.
Yeah, I got lost for
people
this for a
chatting.
while. So let's try and break it down bit by bit, as
Okay.
it's a lesson for you, Tom. So digital
I feel like
currency,
I'm
for
back
one.
at uni now. This is
Yeah.
weirdly great in a way. I don't know.
So digital currency means it's online. So there's no physical coin. You're not going to hold a Bitcoin in your hand. It's decentralized, which means there's no governments, no banks, nothing being able to control it. No government's able to print more of Bitcoin.
That sounds
which
good.
is quite key to the whole thing. And thirdly, a distributed ledger called blockchain. This goes hand in hand with the decentralized bit, because without blockchain, you wouldn't be able to have a decentralized system.
What's this blockchain thing? How does that relate back to what you were chatting about, the original first ledger? Because I understood the ledger and, a list of transactions, but what's this blockchain ledger thing?
So I'll get to that, because
okay.
that is the most complicated bit, and I'm not going to go crazy into detail about it, but I'll get to that.
Okay.
So I've got a structure.
I won't question you heavily on it.
Please don't ask any questions. By the way, just to note, I'm going to try and put loads of links for this kind of stuff in the Instagram post, because they're probably a lot better explaining it if you want to find out any more. So are you following?
I'm with you so far. I'm with you so far. The blockchain, we'll get there.
So basically, the idea is, how could you have a decentralized currency where you could actually trust people to not lie on it? And it's a really big problem. It's called the Byzantine generals problem. Imagine, close your eyes.
Closed.
So you have a city, okay, it's encircled, and you have 4 generals, and they need to decide whether to attack or retreat. And they have to do it together. If they do it together, they win. They take the city. If one of them lies or does the opposite to the others, they'll all die. All the ones that attack die. So how can you get to that? And by the way, the generals don't trust each other. That's also a key thing. Like, we don't trust anyone online, really. And there's no way of doing this without having like a central authority to them generals that say, okay, you're doing this or you're not doing that. And that was the same for this digital currency. Without a centralized body, you just can't do it, until someone called Satoshi Nakamoto came up with a solution. Shout out to him, her, they. No one actually knows who this person is.
Oh wow, that's quite cool.
So he came up with this, or she, or they, this thing called Bitcoin, which used blockchain. Okay, and blockchain's been around for like 30 odd years. I'm not going to spend loads of time going to blockchain, as I said, because it actually uses cryptography and clever maths. And I'm not here to explain that, but the cryptography side of it, that's why it's called cryptocurrency, because it uses.
Oh, okay. I never knew that. Well, yeah, cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and explain it the simplest way I can. And
that's the best way.
Yeah. So imagine we got this massive spreadsheet, big ass spreadsheet, okay? And everyone puts their transactions in, so it's a ledger. But none of these values in the cells actually can be messed around with. So you put them in, and if anyone does try and mess around with it, everyone who uses this ledger can see who it was, and they can then stop it from happening. So you can't change anything in the cells. And each of these cells or blocks, they contain the information of the transaction. Okay, you still following?
Yeah.
Okay, has this information, and there's something called a hash, right? Which is a cryptographic kind of fingerprint. Okay, so it's unique, but it also contains the hash of the cell before it.
Right.
So it's linked to the one before, hence the kind of chain. Okay, so each one has this unique fingerprint on transaction. And because the cell is affected to the one before, and the one before that, and the one before, they're connected into a blockchain. We follow in.
Okay. Okay, yeah. I could got my head around that bit, yeah.
And this ledger is shared on everyone's computers who uses the network. Okay, so it's not controlled by anyone, but it's just shared to everyone.
Right,
So it's like kind of
so
like a wiki page. So like everyone can see wiki, but it's constantly being updated, but no one owns it really. It's kind of like
okay,
open source,
right. So you've got like the first person, the first entry. Say it's like just say it's £10 going across to someone. That's given its own little fingerprint. Which, for the sakes of argument, let's say it's like a line of code or something. Letters and numbers.
Yeah.
To represent that £10 being transferred. And then the next transaction that happens, someone else sends some money to someone or receives money, whatever, and that gets another code. That code is also linked to the previous first code. And then basically got a long list of all these codes, which then group together into blocks, I assume, which is then like where the word blockchain comes from, this chain, this linkage chain. Right.
Well
okay.
done, Tom. Well done. Very good. Because that took me all week, so I'm glad you got it in 10 minutes. So I said before that over time, that transaction history becomes locked in blocks, okay? But there's that thing, when I say over time, it's not actually instantaneous. So the transaction, everyone knows about it, but it's put into like pending. And when it is then confirmed, it is then set in the stone of the blockchain, and it's now a block. Okay, so you have like a few pending ones, and the people that can only confirm these transactions are the cryptocurrency miners. Okay, so that's where you hear about the Bitcoin miners and things like that.
Right.
And what they're doing is finding the hash that connects the new blocks with the previous ones, and it's
that makes sense. Okay, I'm following.
They're running all these numbers, and it's a guessing game. Really, it's not like complex maths that they have to like try and solve. It's just they have to chuck out so many different numbers. And it's based on this SHA-256 hash algorithm. Okay, so if you want to search that up, you go for it. It's very complicated. Okay. I don't understand it, but it's there. And it is a guessing game. Like these miners, the more computing power that you have, the more likely you can churn out more numbers until you get the right one.
So these miners, essentially what they're doing is they take these pending transactions, which have been given a code, that fingerprint that we talked about, and then for the sakes of really easy argument, it's the number 10, and then it's followed by AD, and AD's the thing that links it to the last one. And they're essentially looking at all the pending ones, all these pending codes, and seeing which one actually that's been solidified in the blockchain already has AD on it. Because then they know, okay, that one's a real transaction. That AD links to that AD, so that one then gets put in the next line, and then that gets locked in, rather than like someone faking a number, and maybe they try and fake 12 EF, and obviously there's no EFs in the previous ones, so they can't, that's a fake.
Yeah, so if you try to then like forge the transaction to give you the money, that would change the fingerprint that one has. Anyway, so these miners, they basically take a token of the cryptocurrency for doing that work. So I think they get 12.5 Bitcoin or something at the moment, and that's their kind of payment. So yeah, at the moment that's $650,000 for finding that, and that gets released every 10 minutes, I think, or something like that. Anyway, right. So in summary, the miners get paid for being basically the auditors of the whole of this ledger that's decentralized. Okay. And that's really intensive. It requires big, expensive rigs and lots of electricity to power them. And it's really competitive. Like loads of people are doing it. So going to the 21 million Bitcoin thing that I said earlier, basically every time a block is mined, you get some Bitcoin. At first it was 50, then it was 25, now it's 12.5. And it basically gets halved every 210,000 blocks that are made. And this is around every 4 years currently. Imagine a curve, it will plateau out, and that amount will be 21 million. There's only ever going to be 21 million.
Okay. Where do you think it's going to flatten out at? Like, what do you think the price of Bitcoin's actually going to end up being? Have you looked into that at all?
It's such uncharted territories at the moment, because something like this has never happened before in history. Like people are jumping on the bandwagon of investing, but that's why everyone's saying it's extremely risky investment, because no one knows where the ceiling is. And will there be a ceiling? Because there's no body actually controlling it. There's no legislation or anything.
Yeah, because at the moment, it doesn't seem so much a currency, but rather just a stock that you might invest in. It doesn't seem like something that you buy to then buy your car with, even though I know, like, we spoke about Tesla and things, and like they'll accept Bitcoin, and like I'm sure I've seen that some places like you can buy houses with Bitcoin in some parts of the world. Like, I still feel like it's not changed from being a stock that people just invest in, trying to make money off the stock or off buying a Bitcoin and selling it when it goes up in price, to actually being a currency, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying at the beginning, going back to the gold thing. At the moment, it's just seen as a way of storing value, so putting the money in something, letting it rise and things like that. In the future, there could be so many different ways it could go. So what it is good for is that it removes the middleman of having a bank. So think of a bank, right? What does a bank actually do apart from all the loans and the kind of the making?
They just
money
hold money. They keep the ledger. They sort that out, I guess.
Yeah, so they're just a secure ledger. So they, well, I mean, they do, I guess, hold the money, but it's just a transaction. So like, if I get paid from my work, it will be work paid into me. I then go to Tesco, buy something, it will be a transaction. So it's just a ledger, like we said before.
Right. Okay.
But this way, you don't need that bank. You don't need any of that bureaucracy and like the paperwork that gets involved and all them people being employed to make sure it all runs. You don't need any of that. And it can mean that kind of middleman you can remove from the equation of the money side of things. But it's whether governments and banks would let that happen anyway, because they lose, governments will lose control because you can't follow kind of a transaction as easy as you could with a bank. So, for example, like the drugs trade, there's been loads of like use of Bitcoin on the drugs trade because like the dark web, people like buy drugs on that, and there's no way of like tracking where that goes. So it just turns up at your door kind of thing. It's untraceable.
Smart criminals, to be fair.
Yeah, and there's like security reasons behind it. Like if someone stole your account, you wouldn't ever get your money back because there's no like bank to go, someone stole my money.
Right, okay.
There was this one, and maybe laugh. I felt bad for the guy. He lost his Bitcoin password. Okay, so if you lose that, there's no like, forget your password. That's fine.
Oh right, so you're almost like your wallet's stolen.
Yeah, right. And so back in 2009, when it came out, 50 Bitcoins was about $3. Okay, so people were just like, I'll just throw a bit of money in there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Now, if I had 50 Bitcoins today, that's $2.5 million. So you think of the people. People have made a lot of money, but if you forget that password, all that money's gone. Like you're not getting it back.
How does it work though in terms of interest and like, how people put money, like one of the reasons we put money in banks and things is like people are like, I'll get interest, and like, or people invest their money in the stock market to then make more money, but there can never be more Bitcoin. Like,
but it's the value of one Bitcoin. It's not the amount of Bitcoin in the world. Like, as I said, you can divide it by 100th of a million. Like, it would just be the value of one Bitcoin changes.
Right. I'm down then. It works.
Yeah, there's one more little thing. The environmental side is actually quite important as well. So I read something, and Bitcoin currently uses the annual electricity consumption of the whole of Argentina right now.
No.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So, because that, the mining process that I said about guessing the numbers, because it's so power hungry, it requires so much electricity. And there's the whole thing with Tesla buying that 1.5 billion Bitcoin, and they're all about being environmentally friendly and stuff. And then they're just pumped in all this money, and some of it might be renewable energy, but not really currently.
No, that's crazy. That is. I mean, I don't know how bad printing money is in terms of the environment, because you've got to obviously chop down trees, the factories.
Yeah,
to
but you can plant them again. It's not monoculturally.
Not monocultural. Oh dear, that's crazy. That is actually. Damn, now I'm against Bitcoin. You did a fair bit of research there, man. That was in depth. That was good.
I did. I never want to do it again. This week has been just...
I'm not doing the podcast again.
Yeah, we need to get an expert on some of this to actually talk about it. I'll
Yeah.
talk about stuff I have a vague idea on, not the stuff that I don't anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you chose to do Bitcoin though.
I thought it would be more. Well, it was interesting, but more
It was
easy to
interesting.
understand.
No. Yeah. No. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head right at the start, which is, everyone talks about it, but no one has an idea what it is. And I think
And
that's
hopefully,
like,
people do know a little bit more.
there you go. Whoever listens to this podcast will know. Fair play. How was your strawberry daiquiri there? I see you finishing
It's
it
all
off.
gone. Yeah, I think that's maybe why I struggled at the end there, because I was drinking it all during your bit. And
Just was it going in and out of focus, the page?
yeah, I couldn't read the writing, but no, it was very nice. What about your margarita?
You know what? I was so engrossed in yours, I've actually only drank about half of it.
Well, that calls for us seeing it off. Ready?
Do you want me to?
3, 2, 1. Anyway, this is a good time to sign off. Everyone,
See you next week.
Keep an eye on the Instagram page. We're going to drop loads more on there, and see you guys in a couple of weeks.